Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I will be speaking directly to the second reading amendment that the Labor Party has moved, or the member for Gorton specifically. And I think when you look at the terms of the second reading amendment, you will see that virtually nothing can be out of order in this debate, because it is cast in such broad terms that you can basically talk about fusion on the sun, and that would be relevant to this bill. And we all know why they do this. They do this so that their stupid, undergraduate, silly games played by the Open Foundation, where they can go on there and make out that those members on this side of the House, and I notice the member opposite laughing. Well, of course they laugh. Of course they laugh. The joke, you are the jokes. You are the members opposite are the absolute jokes of this parliament. They take votes from crossbenchers who claim to be in favour of climate change action, but tried to or attempted to hide a donation from a coal director of a coal company who bought his coal mine from Eddie Obeid. And those opposite laugh. They are an appalling group of individuals who simply have misled, misinformed the Australian people through their stupid little puerile games conducted by the Open Foundation. They come in here every single day and they move some second reading amendment because they think they're being oh so clever, like none of them ever left the Student Representative Council at Bond University. That's how they operate. That's the sort of government we could expect from them, Deputy Speaker, a government run by puerile undergraduates. And we don't really have to imagine very hard. We don't have to imagine hard. We only have to look back to when they were last in government in 2010. And they were last in government relying on, you guessed it, Deputy Speaker, the votes of the crossbench. But this time we'll have a very special crossbench, paid for by Simon Holmes a Court, who was today at the National Press Club, where he was making all sorts of claims about you can move as many,
Order. The member for Mackellar will resume his seat. And I call the member for Gellibrand on a point of order.
Yes, it's a point of order on relevance. This is a bill about securing Australia's critical infrastructure against the threat of nation-states and criminal actors.
Will resume his seat. And I call the member for Mackellar.
The member for Gellibrand should have spent more time at the SRC at Bond University really honing his craft of how to play silly games in an elected chamber. But you see, what we do here actually really matters. And there is one point that I will take from him, which is that this is about critical infrastructure. Those opposite have opposed a bill to secure Australia's critical infrastructure. And why have they done that? Why do they do that? Because they have no idea how to govern Australia. What they do know, however, is how to misinform the electorate, how to play silly games through their mates at the Open Foundation, and they also know how to accept votes from the crossbench. They know how to accept votes from the crossbench, bought and paid for by Climate 200, that hides their donations from directors of coal companies who bought their mines from Eddie Obeid. And they don't like anyone talking about Eddie Obeid. But of course, this director of a coal company, he also had an adverse finding at the New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption. So listening to Simon Holmes a Court, he says today, by the way, what Kendall Roy is to succession, Simon Holmes a Court is to Australian politics. I haven't quite seen a similarity that stark in a long time. And what we get from Mr Holmes a Court today was, one slogan, and behind that slogan was another slogan. And if you digged far enough, you found the slogan-making sausage machine, funded by the director of a coal company who bought his mine from Eddie Obeid. But he said he has three values, by which he means three slogans: climate change action, women and integrity. Well, let's not judge them by their rhetoric. Let's judge them by what they do. So on climate change, I can't think, Deputy Speaker, of a greater challenge requiring serious people to make serious points and come up with serious policies. Those on this side of the House came up with net zero by 2050, a fully documented 200-page plan billions of dollars in investment and funding for renewable energy. Oh, I can't believe those opposite at the moment want to be interrupting, given that they're taking votes from a person funded by a coal investor and a coal director whose money came from Eddie Obeid's coal mine.
The member for McKellar will resume his seat, and I call the member for Isaacs on a point of order.
Deputy Speaker. The member for McKellar really does need to direct his remarks to the subject matter of the debate, which is a critical infrastructure bill. On no view does the second reading amendment support this spray, which simply reflects the member's fear of losing his seat to an independent.
Yeah. I call the manager.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the amendment and the debate here has been very, very wide-ranging throughout the debate this afternoon, and just because the member for Isaacs doesn't enjoy what the member is speaking about is not a reason to be confining the debate in a way that hasn't been confined for other speakers.
I thank the Minister. I'll just remind members that it is difficult to hear when you're yelling and screaming out like it's at a football match, so I'll call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I will seek to keep my voice at a lower tempo so you can hear the interruptions. And I understand that the member for Isaac has a perennial fear, which is he goes on ad nauseum about integrity. But of course, Eddie Obeid sat in his party for years. And now what we find is he was granted, according to the Independent Commission Against Corruption in New South Wales, an unlawful coal mine where the processes were illegal. And at the point of that, he then used those profits to hand off to a donor who then sold that mine and used those proceeds to fund crossbench MPs, whose votes they now accept. It is incredibly difficult to understand why the member for Isaacs doesn't want to investigate this process. I mean, he has referred something like 10 or 11 items to the federal police. I wonder if he has referred this incident to the federal police. Or is it really that he's just not interested in the policy, that he's not actually interested in improving integrity in Australian politics, but is more interested in the politics of it and accepting votes from people who receive tainted donations, who don't make an explanation. And we've heard the explanations, by the way, Deputy Speaker. First, it didn't happen. Then it did happen, but it wasn't serious. Then it did happen, but it was a rookie mistake. And now it did happen, but I didn't know about it. And then it did happen, but it was a rookie mistake. I didn't know about it, and the person who did it is now resigned. But of course, the problem we have is, of course, this person is the shareholder of the Climate 200 fund that Simon Holmes Accord is using to fund all these fake independents. Now, I just wonder why those are laughing at the fact that our democracy is being undermined by things like the Open Foundation, and that's why they move these wide-ranging second reading amendments, so they can talk on anything and they can criticise anyone they like, but they don't like it when the tables are turned on them. And what I might suggest to those opposite is that they come in here and they deal with the substance of bills in front of us. Now, I know this works at the Bond University Student Representative Council. I know that this was probably a very clever tactic back in the 90s. But the fact of the matter is we're trying to run a country here. And when people take donations from coal mine executives whose donation is tainted, for whom there was an adverse finding at the New South Wales Independent Against Corruption, you have to wonder why those opposite are not more curious. I'm curious why suddenly their integrity on the policy of integrity doesn't seem to have much integrity, and maybe the member for Isaacs could stand up and explain that, because under his second reading amendment, he can pretty much talk on whatever he likes. So he should do that, and often does, I might add, on many different bills. Or we could actually talk about the Security Legislation Amendment Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill 2022. We could talk about that. But those opposite would rather move smart aleck amendments so they can just have a go, while at the same time then referring all of this to their mates at the Open Foundation that run a website designed to misinform the Australian people. And I can only assume that those opposite have concluded that the Australian people aren't smart enough to see through their tactics, and further to all of that, that the only way they can get elected is by misinforming people, by saying that they're in favour of climate action while accepting money from a coal investor, from a coal mine investor who, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, Deputy Speaker, invested in a coal mine that used to be owned by Eddie Obeid. So all these things really do matter when it comes to integrity. All these things really do matter when it comes to running a government and the parliament of this nation. So if those opposite are sincere, which I somehow doubt, but I hope that I'm wrong, they will, instead of actually moving all these Second Amendment reading speeches or amendments, second reading amendments, they'll actually come in and have a debate around ideas and policies that really matter and stop accepting tainted money and votes from people whose money it was also